Why did a millionaire nearly collapse when he saw triplet children at a restaurant? Marcus Thompson discovered the truth that night that would expose the biggest secret he had been unaware of for 15 years and change his life forever. It was supposed to be a routine business dinner at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Marcus had hosted hundreds of similar meetings in the same private dining room, closing deals worth millions while enjoying world-class cuisine. But this evening would shatter everything he thought he knew about his past and force him to confront the most shocking discovery of his life. Before we continue with this incredible story, could you please write in the comments which city you're watching from? We share new heart-healing stories every day. Now let's get back to this amazing tale. Marcus Thompson was 38 years old and controlled a media empire worth over $500 million. His company, Thompson Media Group, owned television stations, digital platforms, and production companies across North America, making him one of the youngest and most successful entrepreneurs in the entertainment industry. His innovations in content distribution and digital advertising had revolutionized how audiences consumed media and how brands reached consumers. The success had transformed Marcus from a middle-class kid from Detroit into one of New York's most influential business leaders. His penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park from the 60th floor of a luxury building where celebrities and Fortune 500 CEOs were his neighbors. The space featured custom Italian furniture, original artwork worth millions, and technology that anticipated his every need. Marcus's daily routine was a carefully orchestrated performance of power and achievement. His assistant, Jennifer, managed every detail of his schedule with military precision. Board meetings, content strategy sessions, advertiser presentations, and social events that kept him connected to the entertainment industry's most important decision-makers. He traveled in private jets, stayed in presidential suites, and dined at restaurants where reservations were impossible to obtain without connection. But despite all his material accomplishments, Marcus struggled with a loneliness that had grown deeper over the 15 years since his divorce. His marriage to Olivia had ended when his career was just beginning to take off, and he had thrown himself into building his business empire partly as a way to avoid dealing with the emotional pain of losing her. The divorce had been acrimonious and final. Olivia had accused Marcus of caring more about his ambitions than their relationship, while Marcus had felt that Olivia couldn't understand the sacrifices necessary to build something meaningful in the competitive media industry. They had parted ways bitterly, with lawyers handling all communication and no contact maintained afterward. Marcus had dated extensively over the years, but none of his relationships had progressed beyond surface-level compatibility. The women he met were attracted to his wealth and status rather than his personality, and he found himself unable to trust that anyone could love him for who he was, rather than what he had achieved. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that he had built a media empire focused on storytelling and human connection, while becoming increasingly isolated from authentic relationships in his own life. Olivia Williams had been Marcus's college sweetheart and first wife, a relationship that had shaped his understanding of love, partnership, and loss. They met during their junior year at Northwestern University, where Marcus was studying journalism and business, while Olivia pursued a degree in elementary education. She was brilliant, compassionate, and possessed a natural ability to make everyone around her feel valued and understood. Their relationship had been intense and genuine, built on shared dreams about making a positive impact on the world through their respective careers. Marcus wanted to create media content that would inform and inspire audiences, while Olivia planned to teach in underserved communities where dedicated educators could make the biggest difference in children's lives. For 3 years, Marcus and Olivia had been inseparable. They studied together, explored Chicago's cultural offerings, and spent quiet evenings in Olivia's apartment, planning the life they would build together after graduation. Marcus loved Olivia's optimism, her commitment to helping others, and her ability to find joy in simple pleasures that didn't cost money. After graduation, they moved to New York together, where Marcus took an entry-level position at a small media company, while Olivia began teaching at a public elementary school in Brooklyn. They lived in a tiny apartment in Queens, struggling financially but supporting each other's dreams and believing that hard work and mutual dedication would eventually lead to the success they both wanted. Their marriage during their second year in New York was a modest ceremony attended by family and close friends. They couldn't afford an elaborate celebration, but the day was filled with genuine joy and optimism about their future together. Marcus and Olivia saw themselves as partners in every sense, supporting each other's careers, sharing household responsibilities, and building a relationship based on equality and mutual respect. But success, when it finally arrived for Marcus, came faster and more dramatically than either of them had anticipated. A documentary series he had pitched to several networks was picked up by a major cable channel, launching his career and providing the financial security they had worked toward for years. Suddenly, Marcus was meeting with executives, traveling to film locations, and socializing with industry professionals who operated in a world very different from the one he and Olivia had shared. The transformation was gradual, but inevitable. Marcus's work schedule became increasingly demanding, requiring him to attend industry events, networking dinners, and business trips that took him away from home for weeks at a time. The media industry rewarded those who were willing to sacrifice personal relationships for professional advancement, and Marcus found himself caught up in a culture that treated success as the ultimate measure of human worth. As Marcus's career accelerated, the distance between him and Olivia began to grow. The late nights, constant travel, and social obligations that came with his rising status in the media industry left little time for the quiet moments that had once strengthened their relationship. When Marcus was home, he was often distracted by phone calls, emails, and the endless demands of managing a growing business. Olivia tried to be supportive, understanding that Marcus's success was something they had both worked toward and that the opportunities he was receiving were the result of years of dedication and sacrifice. She continued teaching, finding fulfillment in her work with children, while trying to maintain their household and relationship despite Marcus's increasing absence. But the social world that Marcus was entering was filled with people who measured relationships by their utility rather than their authenticity. Industry parties and business dinners were attended by couples who looked perfect in photographs, but often had little genuine connection with each other. Marcus began to feel pressure to conform to these expectations, to present himself as someone who had transcended his modest background and embraced the lifestyle that success was supposed to provide. The tension came to a head during their third year of marriage, when Marcus was offered an opportunity to expand his production company by partnering with a major studio. The deal would require him to relocate to Los Angeles for at least 6 months, working 18-hour days to establish the new operation and prove that his success wasn't just a fluke. Olivia supported Marcus's career ambitions, but she couldn't abandon her teaching position and the students who depended on her to follow him to California for what might become a permanent relocation. She suggested that they maintain their relationship long distance until Marcus's situation stabilized, believing that their love was strong enough to survive temporary separation. But Marcus was beginning to see Olivia's commitment to her teaching career as an obstacle to his own advancement. The entertainment industry was notorious for demanding complete dedication from its participants, and maintaining a marriage to someone who couldn't fully participate in his professional world felt increasingly burdensome rather than supportive. The conversations that led to their divorce were painful and filled with accusations that neither of them meant but couldn't take back. Olivia accused Marcus of abandoning their shared values in pursuit of wealth and status, while Marcus argued that Olivia was being selfish by refusing to support his career when it was finally taking off. The divorce proceedings were handled through lawyers, with Marcus and Olivia unable to have civil conversations about the practical aspects of ending their marriage. Both were hurt, angry, and convinced that the other person had changed in ways that made their relationship impossible to continue. Marcus moved to Los Angeles and threw himself into his work with desperate intensity, using professional success as armor against the emotional pain of losing Olivia. The studio partnership exceeded everyone's expectations, leading to more opportunities and eventually to the media empire that made Marcus wealthy beyond his earlier dreams. Olivia remained in New York, continuing her teaching career and disappearing from Marcus's life completely. They had no mutual friends, no shared financial obligations, and no reason to maintain contact after the divorce was finalized. Marcus occasionally wondered what had become of Olivia, but pride and the demands of his career prevented him from seeking information about her life. Over the following 15 years, Marcus built Thompson Media Group into one of the most successful independent media companies in the country. He acquired television stations, launched digital platforms, and produced content that reached millions of viewers worldwide. His personal wealth grew into the hundreds of millions, providing him with luxuries and experiences that his younger self could never have imagined. But professional achievement hadn't filled the emotional void that Olivia's absence had created. Marcus dated accomplished women who looked perfect at industry events, but none of these relationships developed into the kind of deep partnership he had shared with Olivia. He told himself that he was too busy for serious romantic commitments, but privately he knew that no one had ever made him feel as understood and valued as Olivia had during their college years and early marriage. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, that he had built a media empire focused on telling stories about human connection while becoming increasingly disconnected from meaningful relationships in his own life. His success had provided him with everything he thought he wanted, but it had failed to deliver the personal fulfillment that had once seemed inseparable from professional achievement. On this particular Thursday evening in October, Marcus was scheduled to have dinner with potential investors who were considering a partnership that would allow Thompson Media Group to expand into international markets. The meeting was taking place at Le Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants, where the private dining room and impeccable service provided the perfect setting for high-stakes business negotiations. Marcus arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, wanting to ensure that every detail of the evening was perfect. The investors were considering a $200 million deal that would position his company for unprecedented growth, and Marcus knew that the personal relationships formed during these social interactions were often more important than the financial presentations that followed. As Marcus waited for his guests to arrive, he decided to review his notes one final time in the restaurant's main dining room, where the atmosphere was elegant but less formal than the private space where their dinner would take place. He found a quiet corner table where he could spread out his materials and mentally rehearse the key points he wanted to emphasize during the conversation. But as Marcus looked up from his notes to signal the waiter for a glass of wine, his eyes fell on a scene that made his heart stop. At a table across the dining room, a woman was having dinner with three children who appeared to be about 5 or 6 years old. The woman had her back partially turned to Marcus, but her posture, the way she moved her hands when she talked, and the elegant curve of her neck were unmistakably familiar. When the woman turned slightly to help one of the children with their napkin, Marcus saw her profile clearly for the first time in 15 years. It was Olivia, looking older and more mature but still possessing the same natural grace and beauty that had captivated him during their college years. She was wearing a simple but elegant dress, and her hair was styled in a way that suggested she had maintained her sense of style despite whatever circumstances had brought her to this expensive restaurant with 3 young children. But it was the children who made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. All 3 were beautiful, well-behaved, and bore an unmistakable resemblance to each other that suggested they were siblings, possibly triplets. More shocking was their resemblance to Marcus himself, the same eye color, the same jawline, and the same way of tilting their heads when they were thinking about something. Marcus sat frozen at his table, his mind racing as he tried to process what he was seeing. The children appeared to be approximately 5 years old, which would mean they had been born about 10 years after his divorce from Olivia. But their physical resemblance to him was so striking that several other diners had glanced between Marcus and the children, as if they too noticed the family similarity. The possibility that had occurred to Marcus was almost too overwhelming to consider, but the evidence before his eyes seemed undeniable. Had Olivia been pregnant when they divorced? Had she hidden the pregnancy from him? Or had she discovered it after their marriage was already over? The timeline was confusing, but the children's ages and appearance suggested a connection that Marcus had never suspected. As Marcus watched Olivia interact with the children, he could see that she was a devoted and loving mother. She listened carefully to each child's comments, helped them navigate the restaurant's sophisticated menu, and maintained the kind of patient, nurturing demeanor that had made her such an effective teacher. The children were well-mannered, intelligent, and clearly adored their mother, suggesting that Olivia had created a stable, loving home environment, despite whatever challenges she had faced as a single parent. The little girl, who seemed to be the most talkative of the three, was animatedly describing something that had happened at school, her hands moving expressively in a way that reminded Marcus of his own gestures when he was excited about something. One of the boys was quietly studying the restaurant's artwork, his serious expression and focused attention identical to Marcus's own behavior when he was concentrating on something that interested him. Marcus realized that he was witnessing a family dinner involving his possible children, people who shared his DNA but had grown up without any knowledge of his existence. Olivia had apparently built a life as a single mother, raising 3 children who might be his offspring, while he had spent 15 years building a business empire without any awareness that he had descendants. The emotional impact of this realization was staggering. Marcus had always assumed that his legacy would be the media company he had built and the content he had produced. The possibility that he had children, 3 beautiful, intelligent children who had inherited his features and possibly his talents, changed everything about how he understood his life and his future. As Marcus struggled to decide what to do with this shocking discovery, Olivia stood up from her table to help one of the children who had dropped something on the floor. When she straightened up, her eyes met Marcus's across the dining room, and for a moment, both of them froze in mutual recognition. Olivia's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked like fear, then resignation. She glanced at the children, then back at Marcus, and he could see her making rapid calculations about how to handle this unexpected encounter. After a moment's hesitation, she said something to the children and began walking toward Marcus's table. Marcus stood up as Olivia approached, his heart pounding and his mind filled with questions that he didn't know how to ask. Up close, he could see that the years had been kind to her. She looked healthy, confident, and at peace with herself in a way that suggested she had found happiness despite the challenges of single motherhood. Olivia's voice was steady but cautious when she spoke. She told Marcus that she had seen him from across the room and thought it would be better to acknowledge each other rather than pretend they hadn't noticed. She asked about his career, mentioning that she had seen his name in business publications and knew that he had achieved the success he had always worked toward. Marcus asked about the children, trying to keep his voice casual despite the intensity of his curiosity. Olivia's response was careful and non-committal. She said they were her children and that they were doing well in school and enjoyed living in New York. She didn't volunteer information about their father or the circumstances of their birth, and Marcus didn't feel he could ask directly without creating a scene in the restaurant. But as they talked, Marcus became increasingly certain that the children were his. Their physical resemblance to him was unmistakable, and their ages corresponded to a time frame that would have allowed for conception during the final months of his marriage to Olivia. The possibility that he had been a father for 5 years without knowing it was both thrilling and devastating. As their conversation concluded, Olivia gave Marcus her contact information and suggested that they might talk more privately at another time. She returned to her table, gathered the children, and left the restaurant without looking back. Marcus watched them go, seeing his own features reflected in 3 small faces that represented the family he had never known he had. The investors arrived for their dinner meeting 30 minutes later, but Marcus could barely concentrate on the business discussion. His mind was filled with images of the children, with questions about Olivia's decision to keep their existence secret, and with the overwhelming realization that his life had just become infinitely more complicated and potentially more meaningful than it had been that morning. Can love create miracles even when we're not looking for them? Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we least expect them. Tomorrow we'll share another story that proves family bonds transcend time and circumstances. Let us know in the comments what you think Marcus should do next. Some truths change everything, but they also offer the chance to build something beautiful from what was lost.